Welcome, everyone. We'll give a little bit of a pause here so that everyone can join us, but thank you so much for being here. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and tell us where you're connecting from, what organizations you're a part of, what kind of work you make. We'd love to hear it. Oh, maybe we don't have chat enabled for everyone, or do we? Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. We are making an adjustment to the chat so that we can say where we're connecting from. Wonderful. And we'll wait just one more minute and then we'll get started. We've got so much to cover in a short hour. We're going to try to keep it to an hour here because I know we're all busy. And I really appreciate your being here live, and I hope that you will share your thoughts and your questions. We're going to have, oh, great. Yep, perfect. Thanks. Thanks, Rachel. Oh, it's wonderful to see folks connecting from all over. I'm Amy Milne. I'm the executive director of the Quilt Alliance, and I am joined today off camera right now by my colleague Emma Parker. And I am connecting from rural North Carolina in the foothills of North Carolina, and I love seeing where you are. And I'm going to shortly introduce my colleagues on the panel so that they can say hello. And we'll, as I said earlier, maybe you weren't connected yet, we'll have about an hour format. I'm going to give some overview information about the NEA, just so that you know what kind of grant projects or programs rather that we're talking about, how the NEA what kind of funding they provide, what categories we fit under, and then each of the organizations will talk about, and individuals will talk about how the NEA has impacted them, what's going on right now with their grants or recent grants, and then what kind of actions we can recommend and ask for you from our community. So let me introduce my colleagues, Elaine Yao from Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive, and Susan Hudson, who is a Diné Artist, Navajo artist, and she is the 2024 NEA National Heritage Fellow. She's also a lead artist on a current Quilt Alliance project, NEA-funded project, and Karena Bennett, who's the Surface Design Association Executive Director. So thank you all so much for being willing to just put this together in such a short amount of time. We were really feeling the need for connection right now and some collegial energy and ideas. And we really wanted to hear from you, our community, and hear what you think and get your ideas. So I'm going to go ahead here. We've got slides just because we know you're a visual audience, and I think we know ourselves too. It's easier for us to use graphics sometimes to communicate. So I just want to say a little bit about the National Endowment for the Arts. Sometimes NEA, people think of the National Education Association. It is not that. We are the National Endowment for the Arts, or we are talking about the National Endowment for the Arts. Arts.gov is the website. And the two programs that we're going to be talking about, although they have many programs, are the grants for organizations, or to organizations, and their honors. And I want to go through those a little bit more in just a minute, but I also want to point out just basically basic information about the NEA. It was established in 1965 as an independent federal agency. It's the largest funder of the arts and arts education in communities nationwide, and a catalyst of public and private support for the arts. By advancing equitable opportunities for arts participation and practice, the NEA fosters and sustains an environment in which the arts benefit everyone in the United States, in all 50 states and territories. They provide funding. So this is from a document called Quick Facts, and I think Rachel's going to share that in the chat now. It's a great information piece to use to acquaint yourself with the NEA. One, I pulled out two key facts here. There are many, but the NEA fiscal year 2024 appropriation from the federal budget was $207 million, and that constitutes 0.003%. That's not 3%, that's not 0.03%, 0.003%. And the NEA awards 40% of its grant making. We talked about grants to organizations and honors, but 40% of that grant making goes directly to states and jurisdictions through state and regional arts agencies. So while we are talking about federal grants our organizations receive directly from the NEA, I know the Quilt Alliance receives funding from the North Carolina Arts Council, from South Arts. Those are organizations that receive NEA funding that will also be affected by any cuts and reductions. So I encourage you to take a look at that document. And the next one I want to share is just about folk and traditional arts. That's the category that the Quilt Alliance received its grant. I assume, Elaine, you and Karena, your grants came through that category, but I'm sure you'll cover that. This category is really devoted and really committed to underserved communities with projects including fieldwork, apprenticeships, research, documentation, and public events. That really fits what we do, which is to document, preserve, and share the history of quilts and quilt makers. And you can see the percentages here really match or exceed the poverty numbers of percentage of poverty-bound areas. Folk and traditional arts project activities, 20%, 27% are in rural areas, and 14% of the US population is in rural areas. So they really commit to that audience. And it's really important because there aren't a lot of other funding agencies doing that for the arts. I mentioned an honors program. So the NEA is so unique in that they have fibers included in the traditional folk and traditional arts, but not only do they provide funding for groups and organizations, but also to individuals. And that's why we wanted Susan to join us today. Susan Hudson is the 2024 National Heritage Fellowship Fellow. And this is something that this program has been going on for folk and traditional artists, supporting, recognizing, and sharing their work through this award since 1983 or 82, I think. Definitely 83. And these are the quilters. I didn't include all fiber artists, but I will go back and do an updated list that includes all fiber artists. It's not big. 18 out of 494 are quilters. So, but Susan Hudson was the 2024 fellow, and she's going to speak today. We're going to share a little bit of her work and a video about her work. So a really important program to our community. And then I would just want to share the timeline of what the topic we're talking about, which is federal funding cuts. So this is a timeline of events affecting NEA grantees and anyone who is in support of the NEA or takes advantage of their programs. On February 6th, we were notified that the program, or the grants for arts projects, which is the category that we receive funding under that the guidelines were going to be changing. And there was going to be a priority in this press release. It really focuses on the priority given to projects that take place in 2026 and 2027 that celebrate and honor the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, referred to as there's a consortium group called America 250. So the NEA has been a partner in this initiative for some time. This is not new, but what's new is this real focus and drill down into making that a priority. The grant deadline was extended for anyone applying to, like the Quilt Alliance, for grants. The deadline, I think, was supposed to be in February. They moved it, or March, they moved it to April. And also there was a executive order called Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. There was a back and forth about that, where there was a requirement for grantees to sign something. The NEA was represented, I think, by the ACLU, and fought that, and grantees no longer have to sign that. The NEA implemented they rescinded their previous requirement of grantees, so you no longer have to sign a document. I think it's, they're not saying that they're not going to work with it or around it, but you don't have to sign an agreement anymore. And then here it is, on April 16th, that was rescinded. Then May 2nd is the one that affected us and prompted us to post about our grant, was the announcement, or the letter that we received, that our grant would be terminated. And not only that, but the president sent his discretionary budget, sometimes referred to as a skinny budget, for 2026, and it includes the complete elimination of the NEA and 15 other small agencies. And prior to that, agencies like the IMLS, National Endowment for the Humanities, who I think Elaine will speak about, the IMLS, were essentially eliminated and employees were let go. So I don't know the details of that one, but I know that they line up within the same time frame and are, equally damaging. So I'm almost finished, but I want to show you the difference between the priorities. The Quilt Alliance applied for a grant in this cycle, so we turned it in April. These were the guidelines. These were the priorities included in the grant guidelines. So when we created our proposal, we used this set of guidelines. These were the priorities included in the May 2nd letter. Many of them line up with previous priorities of the NEA. You can see that the America 250 priority was already there earlier this year. But what wasn't in the notification were these priorities. These came as part of the letter that we received. So I don't recall ever seeing many of these on the NEA list of priorities. These are entirely new priorities. I'm going to share now just our information about the Quilt Alliance project really quickly, and then we'll move on. This is the project that we currently are funded under. The 2023 cycle goes all the way to 2025. The NEA is very generous with time. They give you 2 years to complete your project. So that means starting and doing your grant, turning in your report. It's wonderful. So this started in 2023. These are the projects or the partners that we worked with. public events where communities come together to share and document quilts, learn about the quilt makers and the quilt owners and the quilts themselves. It was for $20,000, and we found raised to the match through family foundations and private foundations. It requires a one-to-one match in the Grants for Art Projects program, and that's to ensure that the organization is invested in the project as the NEA is. These are the partner communities we worked with. Native American quilters, African American quilters, Quilts of Valor Foundation members and recipients, and Modern Quilt Guild members. Those are all underrepresented voices in the Quilters SOS oral history project. So we looked at what our project, whose voices were included. We compared that to the quilt world in general and saw that there were some voices missing, and we really wanted to make sure that they were included and represented. So I think on a Facebook message, someone was asking about if we would share the letter. So this is our termination letter in 2 screens. This is what we received. I pulled out this part because it says that this is the section where it shares the new priorities, which I shared on a previous slide. You can see that 2 of the priorities were supporting the military and veterans and supporting tribal communities. So we did include those 2 priorities in our grant. So we have applied for, we've submitted an appeal. But the things to also know about this grant is that we were just like a month away from finishing the grant. You know, it feels like a strange action to take to terminate our grant when we were so close to finishing. It almost was going to cost them more in staff time to do this termination than it would to choose not to. We have received yesterday in the bank our final payment for the grant. And we expect to work with Susan and our other lead artists to finish the activities. We have to finish, you know, a month earlier. But, you know, the appeal was really important. That's a part of the action we're taking to add our voices to other voices who have not been as lucky with their timeline. So as far as how you can help the Quilt Alliance, join us, become a member. It's $35 a year to become a member. And I'll ask, oh, great. Thank you, Rachel's already put our link in. Your guild can become a member. That's $200 a year, but all your members can become individual members. Contact your congressional representatives. If you use the 5 Calls app on your phone, there is a script for NEA support. You just click on it. It tells you what to say. You put in your zip code. It tells you who to call. I can't guarantee that their response will be what it will be, but it does really make a difference, and it's important. Subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on Facebook, share your story. We want your voice to be heard too. And, you know, there are other groups that you can look at for advocacy. I got a lot of the information that I shared with you from the Americans for the Arts website. Great advocacy. In North Carolina, we have NC Arts, which is another great agency. So I'm going to pass the mic to you, Elaine, but thanks so much, everyone.
Hello, good afternoon. And thank you, everybody, and Amy for convening this. I'll be brief just because I know we have other speakers. And I'll start with an introduction to the Berkeley Art Museum, since I think as an institution, we're relatively new in the fiber art space. So next slide, please. We are the University Art Museum of the University of California at Berkeley. Here's just a shot of our building. And we are a collecting institution, 25,000 artworks across all periods of time in all kinds of media, with particular strength historically in abstract painting, Bay Area conceptual art, historical Asian collections, film. As you see, we are a film archive that also collects 18,000 films and video, spanning the entire history of cinema. And of course now, with the Eli Leon bequest that was given in 2019, now home to over 3,000 African American quilts and related textiles. Because we are part of the university, supporting scholarship, teaching, and the public service mission is really kind of the triad of work that we do. And that's sort of the image on the right where you see one of our kind of marquee events, welcoming new undergraduates to campus, where we hand out our art posters and get them familiar with the museum space. Next slide. Yeah, and so as you might imagine, as any sort of mid-sized art museum, our activities really span the gamut. Film screenings. We operate 4 study centers that welcome the campus community, faculty, and members of the public to look and examine artworks up close. That's also part of my job as academic liaison at UC Berkeley, or the Berkeley Art Museum. We are so enthusiastic and love our student committee, which is really our kind of the ambassador student group between the museum and the undergraduates on campus. And we are a venue for lectures, performances, art exhibitions, and artist workshops. And again, these images are just a sampling of the nature of the work that we do. Next slide, please. So yes, grant making, these federal grants and the work around caring for the quilt bequest. This is how things began. All of these images, well, the upper left is an image of the quilts in Eli Leon's Oakland home, as he was the primary creator of this collection. And the other 3 images is how they looked when they came to the museum, when the ownership transferred in 2019. This is how it started, kind of wrapped and rolled and in piles. And so we really sought the support of many, many granting institutions to help us, not just to figure out what's here, but then figure out how to make them accessible to a wider public. Next slide, please. So just to give you a sense of the volume, and we've done this calculation a couple of different ways, but we landed on this. So the entirety of the collection, when considered, you know, when fully, I'll talk about the conservation process in a moment, but in the state where they are in our museum storage space, in acid-free boxes, conserved and put away, the total volume would fill 3 40-foot long shipping containers. It's a lot. And so I think when we as an institution were considering the magnitude, I think we felt fairly confident in saying that no one institution has had to really address a collection of this magnitude before. Next slide, please. Right, so the work that we've been embarking upon, and then I'll kind of slide in where the grants come into the picture. As far as the conservation initiative goes, it is something that we began in partnership with a San Francisco-based textile conservation studio that really helped us devise a multi-year initiative to clean, treat, catalog, rehouse, and store the quilts in climate-controlled environments. We began this in December of 2021. We are about halfway through this entire process, which involves, and I'll just narrate these different images, treating the quilts in an oxygen deprivation chamber, basically flushing the quilts with carbon dioxide gas so as to arrest and really address potential growth of pests and mold. As you might extrapolate from that image of Eli's home stuffed with quilts, you know, it was just his living space. He had a cat. There were rats. You know, it was just like not the kind of place you want to keep historical quilts, nor is it really the best environment in which to then have them safely brought into a museum space. And so the oxygen deprivation chamber, the anoxia treatment is what you see on the left. Then they're then vacuumed, treated with an antiseptic cleaner, and then interleaved with the acid-free tissue and rehoused, and then eventually brought back into the museum space. So that center image and the image on the right is sort of what you see as their resting place in the museum. Next slide, please. So the Save America's Treasures grant, which is administered, as you see here on the slide, through IMLS, standing for the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and in partnership with NEA and NEH, was an enormous award that we had applied for, again, to help address the magnitude of this, of caring for this collection. We were awarded $461,000 to help us get us through the finish line with this. And of course, in receiving the notice in early April, about 45% of unspent grant funds were then revoked. So the implications of this is, about half the collection, about 1,600 objects still require care. We are fortunate because we are a part of this larger university. We do have campus funding to help fund the project through the calendar year. And in the meantime, that has bought us a little bit of runway to really re-strategize about how to fundraise for the lost money for conservation. But I just want to make the really critical point that we see this conservation work as absolutely essential, and it is the first step towards making the study and exhibition of these quilts publicly accessible. Um, yeah, full stop. We in our again, we have been working with our main office on campus that manages federal grants and contracts, and our campus council to file an appeal, which is within our rights according to the contract terms. And interestingly, we made the case that this was not part of any DEI-driven agenda. Quite frankly, the sole purpose of the Save America's Treasures grants is precisely that, which is to stabilize the physical condition of these objects, which I imagine many on this call regard as objects of American cultural heritage. Next slide, please. I think this is my last one. So our National Endowment for the Arts grant was also canceled recently. Amy, to your point, we applied for this grant under the museums and museums exhibition category, not folk and traditional arts, because it was specifically intended to support the upcoming exhibition, the catalog cover of which you see here, and to fund related programs, so lectures, artist workshops, other convenings related to the show. As you can see, the show opens in about 3 weeks. It is rapidly approaching. The work will continue. We again are fortunate to be really plugged into a larger arts community, and with my amazing colleagues in our development office, we will just continue to pivot and just find ways to cover the costs of things as they are proceeding. The exhibition itself frames African American quilt making in the context of the Second Great Migration to California specifically. And it features 100 artworks representing the work of 80 African American quilt makers, predominantly women with ties to the SF Bay Area. About 85 of those quilts come from the BAM PFA collection. And again, their display is only made possible because of previous conservation efforts. The other 15 quilts, I'm really pleased to say, spotlight work by the African American Quilt Guild of Oakland and their current members, which we're super thrilled about. Next slide, please. Yeah, the appeal slide, what you can do. If you're able to come, we would love for you to come see the exhibition. The opening day is a free community day, but it is on view through Thanksgiving. Or you can buy the catalog. It's hopefully a way for you to see the kind of work that BAM PFA is committed to doing for the quilts, around the quilts. And again, just supporting the institution in other ways, joining as a member, just being interested in the kind of work we do. And then I'm sure there'll be other questions coming up at the end, but that's all I have.
Thank you, Elaine. Next, we're going to hear from Susan Hudson. And Susan, you're the 2024 NEA National Heritage Fellow. And we've got an image here, and I'm just going to turn it over to you. We've got the video to share. Would you like for folks to see the video first, or do you want to speak first?
I think the video first.
Okay. So these are the rest of the cohort for 2024. And here's a shot of Susan receiving her award. And I love this. These are posts that you made on social media. You can follow Susan here, Navajams. And here are two pieces. What are the titles?
The first one on the left-hand side, that is the walk of my ancestors, coming home. And then the other one is the first contemporary ledger quilter I made, and that was the one that it was historical. It's called The Stars Among the Shikawakan. That's the one that former Senator Bennett, Horace Campbell, and we talked about this. And he signed it as a senator when he was a senator at the time. And he's the one that encouraged me to do what I was doing, to tell our stories, to reclaim our stories, because of the way that history has been talking about us as Indigenous people. So that's.
I want to ask you about that after we watch the video, because I think, you are the first Native American quilter to be named as a National Heritage Fellow. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. All right, let's watch this short video and then we'll talk some more.
I want to acknowledge my ancestors, what they had to do to survive for me to be here. Somebody has to talk for my ancestors. Somebody has to talk about the things that happened to us. The boarding schools, the long walk. So I do my quilts, I do my art because I was gifted this. And I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be loud. I'm a contemporary ledger quilter. Quilting for us Navajos is not traditional. It was something forced upon us. My mother was forced to quilt in the boarding schools, so she handed that down to me. Original sewing machine, right here. It's been with me. Been quilting almost 60 years now. I thought it would work out good. When I started having my kids, I realized if I made quilts, I can sell them. So that was my way of making a little bit of money. Former Senator Bennett, Horace Campbell, we made a trade for some quilts because he was going to have a giveaway. And then he was telling me, he goes, hey, your stuff's kind of boring. And I'm like, what? And then he says, think outside the box. Don't think what everybody else is doing. Think outside the box. What do you really like? And then that's when we started talking about ledger art. If you look in history, if you look at the pictures and stuff, it's a story. It's about war, it's about birth, marriages, falling in love, the death of somebody. And we adapted to use whatever material was in front of us. This is when that little light bulb went on in my head. I liked the adaptability, the colors, and it was somebody's story. And I could relate to that. And I said, that's what I want to do. I did this for this lady because she had also lost her mother. Part of that process of morning, waking up like it's a dream, but then just screaming my heart out wherever I was, whether I was even driving in a car, pull over and just scream. That agony in even my divorces weren't that bad, but that's what I did. So I did it all in the nighttime because that's when you can be yourself at nighttime when there's nobody around. The importance of quilts is there's always a story behind that quilt. The first one I made is on the long walk. The second one is on the missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. And the next one is on the boarding schools. I wanted to bring voice to the voiceless, to tell them how resilient we are as Navajo people, that we're human. This is our land. These are our people. I took that and I forced people to listen to what I have to say because I'm speaking for them. I make a quilt. Millions of people are gonna see that quilt and millions of people are gonna learn about my story. And especially, they're gonna give a voice to my ancestors and to my mother. That's why I tell those stories. A lot of times when I'm working on something, I can feel my ancestors with me, with the women right there. They're the ones that guide me to where I need to go. They'll be telling me their stories, and I know I'm not alone. I want my children, my daughters, and my granddaughters, and my descendants to carry on the stories and to stand up and say they are Kianis.
Sorry, that I just said that's a beautiful piece. And I know you were telling me about how you felt when you received that award. And can you just share a little bit about that?
Sure. Okay. Yata Bennett, Susan Hudson Nestle, Kiani Nestle, Destiny Basashin Tabahat, the Shate, Nakai, the Shanali, and from Tohotsoi, on the Great Navajo Nation. Well, actually, that's in Cheat Springs, New Mexico, but we had another name for it because when we were little, we were herding sheep, and sheep poop all over. So, yeah, but I'm from Cheat Springs and I'm a Kiani. And I want to thank you for allowing me to talk because this award that my ancestors and my mother received. I just happened to be the one alive and the one to be able to do this. But this, I get emotional. Um, this award was for my ancestors and my mother. And I was nominated by Senator Bennett Horace Campbell. I didn't know nothing about this award. I just, just was doing my quilts and just doing my thing through the years. And I've been talking about a lot of stuff like missing and murdered Indigenous women, boarding school and the long walk. And winning the NEA brought that to be how do I say it? When I was there physically to receive the award, I was able to talk about things like the epidemic of missing and murdered, in the boarding schools and things that are pertinent to our lives, intergenerational trauma, what Quilt Alliance allowed me to talk about a few years ago in one of my quilts being shown in one of the talks. And this award was twofold for me because it was kind of like, wow, I won this. Okay, now my ancestors and my mother, they're being honored by this. And then Cheat Springs, New Mexico is now being put on the map. Now we consider it the sewing capital of the Navajo Nation. And then now our Navajo people are being recognized. And then our indigenous quilters are being recognized for the work that for the quilts that we're doing. You know, a lot of them learned how to sew in boarding schools and we're traumatized. We're just beaten up. And my mom, when she told me her story, I understood. And so I knew I was going to have to talk about the stories about our about the things that happened to them in the boarding school. And this is my way of giving voices to them, to reclaim the voices and to stop the genocide of our stories as human beings, because everybody that quilts has a story to tell. Whether they bought a kit or they're learning how to sew, they bought a kit, put it together, that's a story there, or, being there where their grandmas or their, aunties or somebody there just sitting there, getting together and sewing, whether it's our knotlets or our LGBTQ communities, them, right now, I'm one of the co-founders of the Navajo Quilt Project. So they're able to run it over there in Sheet Springs, but there are LGBTQ. And also was winning this award, I was able to talk. I was able to go to the White House. I was able to, the two quotes that you saw there, the long walk of my ancestors and Stars Among the Chico Wakan, they were shown in the White House. And what's really, when I was invited, it was kind of one of those surreal where I was there talking, and then I can see the division among the people. The white men right here, the white women in the back, and the people of color on this side. And then to sit there to know that I was in the same buildings where they made the laws for Congress and, act of wars to disseminate our people to do what they did. And I can hear the crying and the tears. And when I acknowledged the people whose lands I was walking upon and saying my family's name, saying who I was, saying what clans I was, introduced myself, I knew then that they were going to be there with me. So I can feel them all around me. And then when we went over to the White House and took our pictures, that was another surreal, because that is where problems start. And then I was able to take the pictures. And then I was invited to the Kennedy Center. Mary Fonts and we were talking at QuiltCon, and I was telling Mary Fonts, I says, Mary, I'm gonna keep talking, I'm gonna keep telling you stories, and I'll probably get arrested for it because of now the new rules and regulations. And I said, if I do that, one of my kids is gonna get hold of you, and I want you to start a GoFundMe. Free Susan Hudson, because I'm gonna be out there protesting. This is my way of our protesting, our telling of our stories. And then I went to the Kennedy Center. I thought about that, a couple of weeks ago. I would not be allowed in the Kennedy Center today. They would, the other 9 people would have been out there. I would have been in the parking lot sitting there. And to be able to have what you just saw in the video to be shown, and then for them to give me a few minutes to talk, to tell them, that, hey, this is our story. We need to tell our stories, and you need to listen. You need to stop having some white person telling me my story. And I'm just like, no, this is my story. To being allowed to say what I needed to say, and then to go into the Library of Congress, which really, really was hard for me too, because that's where everything is at. That's where all the laws were at. That's where I call them the prisoner of war, all the documentation, all that. And it's just my family's names that were on the long walk, their names are there.
Ooh, that is so,
My name is there now
yeah, that's,
in another way. And
that's
so that was
wonderful.
really, so when I looked at my acceptance speech, because a lot of people wrote down what they're going to say, I didn't know what I was going to say. I went up there, but I felt all my ancestors. I felt them all right there. And then when I look at what I'm talking about, I don't see myself. It was them talking. As I said, I should not be there. I should not have gotten that award, which is true. I should have gotten that award. But for me, to my ancestors done all this, to receive the award given by Congress, given to me, because I sat down and I listened to the stories and I put the stories in a quilt, showing the atrocities that Congress did against us was such an oxymoron. And it was just blowing my mind.
I
But
bet.
then I thought about it that yes, I am the first Indigenous male, female, LGBTQ quilter to receive this award. And anybody that receives this award, we are role models because sometimes we come from little places like Miss Pat came from Pocahontas, Arkansas.
Yeah.
I had to talk to her about that because it was like, what? You know,
Oh,
we
Susan.
are standing upon the shoulders of our ancestors. One day, we're going to be ancestors. And whoever keeps winning this or be like even to be, I'm so honored to be part of this one for Native quilters. That
Well,
they're going to be on my shoulders.
yeah, you have laid out so beautifully why that program is so important and so impactful. Thank you so much, Susan. I wish we could keep talking about this award, but I do want to come back to it in discussion. But I want to hear from Karena now of the Surface Design Association and tell us about your organization.
Thanks, Amy, and it's a real honor to be here with you, Susan, and Elaine, and Amy. Thank you for organizing and talking about this. My name's Karena Bennett, and I'm the Executive Director of Surface Design Association. SDA was founded in 1977 to encourage innovation and advocate for excellence in fiber and textile art. We are a member organization with members in 40 countries around the world. Who are working in a variety of fiber and textile techniques, processes, materials, and traditions. So we take a really broad look at what at fiber and textiles, and we organize exhibitions and events. We provide support through awards and grants, and we publish our quarterly Surface Design Journal. Next slide, please, Amy. The journal is really the heart of SDA. It's nearly 50 years old at this point. And each of our issues features a broad range of global voices. That's something that's really important to us. We really strive to incorporate a diversity of writers and artists and perspectives in each issue. We also work really hard to pay contributors fairly and support them through the publication process. So sometimes that might mean that this is someone's first publication opportunity. And other times we have really seasoned, historians or scholars who are providing contributions to the journal. And given the depth of the information and the longevity of the publication, it's really, it serves as a really important documentation of the field of fiber art, especially as we see fiber art become more and more present in contemporary art discourse. There's a real need to recognize and contextualize these artists and traditions in the way that I think our journal does. Next slide, please, Amy. So I'm going to give you a little background on our guest editor issues. So SDA has really spent time looking at ourselves, looking at the organizations, our practices, our policies and procedures, and thinking about how we sort of embed equity into what we do authentically in all areas of the organization. And much of that much of what we do in our work comes from really collaborative processes and collaborative decision making. That's really important. As we were going through this process, one of the things that came up was our editorial team. They're a small team of really committed and wonderful individuals, but they recognize they're making a lot of the decisions of what's in the journal and what's not, right? It's their editorial vision. Elizabeth Kozlowski is our editor. She really saw that it's limited by what she knows, by who she knows. And so we started to explore ways that we could broaden this, that we could open it up, that we could turn the control over, the vision over to somebody else to explore themes and topics that were really important to us. So in 2021, we had our first guest editor issue with Precious Lavelle. And it was called the Solidarity issue. And Precious really came to us with an idea of wanting to explore a journal that was produced, that was artists and writers of the African diaspora. And she put together this really beautiful journal. She pulled on her personal network and connections and vision to bring the journal to life. It's only, our journal's 64 pages. This could be, 6,000 pages long, right? This is a slice of contemporary fiber in that lens. But it was Precious's vision, right? And that's what really made it something that felt important and unique. And as we completed the journal, we were really, really proud of this issue. And it achieved a lot of the goals. We started working with contributors that were new to us, that were new to SDA, and they've since become frequent contributors in other publications since then. We are working with artists that we see become part of our community. So those goals felt like they were really well achieved. Additionally, there was something so special that happened in this space that was created when you had people from this group, writers talking about artists, art, that connection just created this really, really powerful moment and space for nuance and differing ideas and similar themes and all these really kind of topics that bubbled to the top that we weren't expecting. Next slide, Amy. And so our next guest editor issue was in winter 2003. We invited Rebecca Frank to come on, and she had a really powerful idea. She really wanted, as a member of the queer community, she really wanted to develop this issue that really explored the complexity of being a queer person, being LGBTQIA+ in the world today, and not flattening that, not simplifying it, but complicating it. And so with this issue, she pulled again from her network, her community, and we received a $20,000 grant from the NEA for this publication. Bringing on a guest editor, we're a really, really, really tiny organization. So each journal costs us about $50,000 to produce. And so we received a $20,000 grant from the NEA. That's significant support. When we bring on a guest editor, that's a whole additional layer of expenses that we don't have with our general publication. So having this to take on these ambitious projects, to have this honor of receiving the grant was really, really important to us. It also allowed us to do additional outreach and accessibility efforts that we can't always do on our limited budget. So that was, we received that grant. We were able to utilize all the funds from that and close that grant out, which was, again, really, really helpful for us as a small organization. Next slide, please, Amy. And now we're working on this year our third guest editor issue with Giannina Dwin. Traditions and Persistence. And this issue is will feature Latinx artists and writers from the Americas who are exploring indigeneity, migration, all in the lens of climate change and environmental change. And what that means traditionally and how they're adjusting to that. There's a lot of really wonderful, incredible artists that will be represented in this issue. We applied for a $20,000 grant from the NEA, which we expected to receive. And as far as we know, it's sort of, dead on arrival. What I can say is that we remain very committed to our equity practices. We are not going to change how we are applying to grants. We are not going to change how we are talking about our community, how we are using our platform. That is not negotiable for our organization. And that's hard. That's a hard thing that doesn't, always win you all the friends in the world, but it's where our values lie. And that's really important to us. So what that means for us is, we have to figure it out. We have to figure out $20,000 in funding. To put that in perspective, that's like 7% of our annual budget. We're tiny. We're a small organization. It means we will be spending more time fundraising, and less time on other things. Like ultimately, that is what we will need to do. And in a time when I think publications especially are closing left and right, it's really hard to run a print publication in 2025. Every single expense for us has gone up significantly in the past few years. It feels like the vulnerability of that is just can't be ignored. And so I think also the other outcome for all of us, for all of the organizations impacted by this, is that projects will be less ambitious. We will have to be more realistic about what we do. And ultimately, I don't think that serves us, right? I don't think that serves our goals in the best way it can. You can go to the last slide. The ways, I think there might be one more. Oh, okay. The ways you can support us as an organization, similar to everyone else. Become a member if you value this kind of stuff. Become a member to SDA. Donate. We do not deny membership to anybody. If cost is a barrier, we have a community support fund that our members help support, which awards memberships to anyone facing a barrier. Contact your legislators, make your voice heard, invest. If it's not in one of our organizations, invest in an organization that matters to you, that makes a difference, whether they're receiving NEA funding or not. The trickle down, the waterfall of all these changes and funding is going to ultimately affect the entire cultural landscape, I think. And it feels like now is a moment to be heard, to make an action, to do something.
Amen. And Annie asked in the chat about, the fact that universities have come together to take legal action, band together to take legal action against the current administrative to fight their revoking allocated grant federal funds. What about arts organizations? Do we have any plans to do that? What are our options to do that? I think that's such a great question. We just had a board meeting an hour before this meeting, and one of the questions we had was, okay, well, I did some figuring, and our grant budget in the last 2 years has been between the percentage that grants holds from the total is like 30%, 40% of our funding, especially for projects, is grants. And we know there's some trickle down. Yes, we're going to have to scramble. We're going to have to find new sources of funding, but what can we do as a group to do more than just appeal our grants? I think maybe that's our next discussion. I can tell you, audience, that many of us participate in monthly executive directors groups where we talk about issues that face all our organizations, what have coming. So we already have a structure for that set up that we could implement. But honestly, what's been frustrating to me is that, and I know all of you can relate to this, is having your responsibilities, and then you've got all these additional actions and reactions that have to happen when these federal cuts happen or grant priorities shift. It's very, very frustrating. And when you're on a small budget, you know, or like Susan, you're working for the government already, and you're having to be very careful about your activities and in relationship to your own position and the funding for your position. I think we are all feeling that. I mean, have you done more, gone beyond an appeal letter, any of you, to take action? As far as, have you put out I know you did a newsletter, Elaine, about the grant cuts and put forth a statement about what you're not changing your values. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it was a really strange mental exercise knowing how to compose an appeal letter. Um, I mean, I know, Amy, you flashed the official language of the termination, and um, in the end, yeah, we ultimately kind of thought through as a team here all of our options for, like, yeah, exactly. I think, Karena, you alluded to this too. Like, do we try to adjust the language around our project to fit these new requirements? Or is it truly we remain committed to the project because that's how we conceived and believed in our work, in our projects, and ultimately it was a way of just contesting how basically the federal government misunderstands the nature of the work, and how this, in their stated language of preserving American artistic heritage. I mean, just again, restating the arguments. I just wanted to point out, didn't make the connection until now, between Susan, your presentation, and Amy. Part of the collection that we have inherited as a museum contains the work of 3 other NEA Heritage Fellows who are quilt makers. And so I think, just for among us here, that's, again, a testament to what this kind of grant making and funding does. It preserves, it elevates, it brings truth telling to the surface in ways that our country needs to hear it. Um, and I think, speaking from the position in an art museum, it feels crucial for us at this point that quilt making and fiber practices in general that have been always so sidelined historically are now being brought into the larger so-called canon, right? Just making a case for its validity as a really powerful artistic language. I feel like I'm speaking to the choir, but I think if anybody just needed that kind of comfort and rallying cry, here we are.
Yeah, I'm just typing that it's, you know, we know that how profound this is. We know how we are impacting our communities. Now we just have to translate that into some kind of economic value. It seems strange to have to put our messaging out there in new terms in a way. We have a lot of data, but are we going to have to think about what data we're collecting now and change our metrics to prove our worth? And, you know, it's going to take a while to wrap our brains around how to make these shifts, I think. And hopefully artists like Susan are not going to have to make those shifts, and organizations like ours are not going to be forced to make those shifts of values. That's the thing that to me is the most rattling, is do we continue to hold our values, or do we dilute? Do we get smaller? Do we change our priorities? We certainly don't want to, you know, but now we got to figure out our work, how we define our worth. I didn't show a slide that I pulled that had to do with Department of Commerce, and it has on homepage of the Department of Commerce. It's about, maybe if you could find it, Emma, you could put it in the chat just so that people could look at it. Because what it shows on the homepage, it says trends or latest trends, and it shows arts and cultural contributions to the economy are rising. And it shows in comparison to GDP, it's higher than just the standard GDP. So it shows that museums, entertainment venues, the broader profit and nonprofit arts and culture is providing, ironically, more contribution to the economy than ever. It's growing. It's just really, I think that's the kind of messaging we're going to have to pull out. We're going to have to say, wait a minute, the NEA is only what do we say, 0.003, yet our impact on the economy is, oh, thank you, Emma. Take a look at that. It's pretty interesting. And I'm no economist, Lordy knows, but I do think that I can read a bar graph and see that there is an impact. And I know it doesn't just include nonprofits, but I hope this is the first of many conversations about how we as arts organization leaders and artists can try to speak in terms of the new language that is being broadcast, how we can use those.
Can I interject though, Amy?
Yes.
I actually have a little bit of a different point of view. I don't want to, we're not gonna, censor ourselves. We're not going to change our language to meet these priorities because that is not where our values lie. Like we're not going to, even if we're not changing our practices, we're not going to change our language. We're not going to spin how we're talking about things as an organization. I think somebody brought up, what happens when organizations kind of do this like passive thing, right? Like we're not political, or what does that mean? Not saying something says a lot. If you're not saying something and you're not bringing voices and you're not thinking about that really deeply, that is saying a lot actually. And I think that's important.
I agree. I guess maybe I didn't get that across. What I mean to say is we do bring value, and I want to use our creativity to point out all the ways that we bring value. And it may not necessarily be monetary, but we are powerful and important storytellers and story keepers. But I think that was really important to say that we cannot be backed into a corner. And I think that's what we saw happen with the NEA, right? They put out that requirement that that recipients would agree to that executive order, and then they got a legal representation that helped them rescind that requirement.
The other, and I know we're running over, but the other thing, there was a comment about private support, right? And private support for the arts is way greater than, I think, and this is what Amy is talking about too, way greater than in any sort of governmental or public support. And that's a lot how we think about ourselves at SDA, is that it really, each member is contributing. We would not exist without members. Our membership income is 60-70% of our overall income. So that's $100 at a time, right? Our biggest donor is a $5,000 donor. We are not like, we don't have deep pockets, but that matters in our decision making, right? And we aren't beholden. We aren't, but it is true that funding of $20,000 is like allows us to do things we couldn't do otherwise. And it's that tension that is really, really difficult.
It really is. Susan, yeah.
I might not be able to write letters or protest or any of that until I retire. But if you guys have a fundraiser, or if you need me to talk about my NEA, you guys are just giving me great ideas for my quilts, because I'm the activist and stuff. And a lot of this, I kind of say, welcome to our world, because us as Indigenous people, treaties aren't met, or any, and the funding is really bad. So, if you need me to, I can donate a quilt, and you can raise money that way if you need me to. I have no problem with that. I'll make a star quilt. I won't make activist quilt.
Within reason.
But those are money for me. But I mean, that's my way of giving back to you. You know,
Thank
I
you.
think it's more powerful if I was to make a quilt, even a wall size quilt. You know, I could make it not political, but my activism in there. And you know, help raise some money for another project because you're giving a voice to. You're helping me reclaim my ancestors and my mother's voices by allowing me to do what I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna shoot screens tomorrow and we're gonna do interviews tomorrow. You're allowing us to do that, and this is my way of giving back.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point. Sharing the stories, sharing the work is the best way for us to show our value. It just because it is valuable and it is important. And any parting comments or questions? I think that we probably are going to include the chat in this recording, so if you are on, you should be able to access that. Thank you all for being here. We don't have the time to really go into a longer discussion, but I hope that this gave our community an idea of how the NEA is visible and impactful in our community. I hope it doesn't go away. We're going to fight together. And if you have ideas for ways to help us fight or ways we can do it without diluting our message and our values, please let us know. Thank you, Elaine and Karena and Susan and Rachel and Emma for helping. I hope everyone has a wonderful week and weekend. Take
We
care.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you
everybody.
so much, everyone.